What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are talking through a Buffalo Bills 2024 preview. We're going to talk through fantasy projections. We're going to talk through their offensive depth chart. We're going to talk about what happened in 2023. We're going to talk schedule predictions. And we're going to answer the question, are they Super Bowl bound? I think that, based on what we saw last year, 11-6, a top 6 unit on both offense and defense. So 6th in points per game on offense, 3rd in points per game on defense. Lost in the playoffs to Kansas City, which has become a common theme of the Buffalo Bills over the last few years. Stephon Diggs saga is over, and they overhauled this offense. So, Randy, what did you think of this offseason, their 2023 season, all of that stuff?
Yeah, they overhauled the defense too. Don't get it wrong.
They sure did.
I think this is definitely a team trying to reestablish their identity and bring in some much needed youth. You have the young quarterback on the big contract. Diggs has been an issue, and the play subsided this year to where it was the time to move him on. Defense, they've had a lot of injuries to all the veteran star names that everyone knows, so they pretty much moved on for almost all of them, except Von Miller, basically, and that's probably more contract-wise than anything. So this is really interesting. This is a team that struggled on offense for most of the season, changed play callers, and the offense really kind of loosened up a bit and got back all the way up to 6 in points per game, as you see here. So that's a good sign for this season. But again, a bunch of new weapons, basically a whole new offense here, minus the offensive line. So we're going to see a lot of changes, and I think they should be pretty good, though. I don't think this is the team that's blowing everyone out of the water. They're not going to have the most wins in the league by any means, but they're going to be fighting every game and most likely in the playoffs.
Do you think losing Diggs severely impacts this offense?
No, I don't, because he wasn't as big a factor as he was this last year as he has been in the past. And the biggest factor I saw from him is more him demanding targets and not being efficient with them.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it didn't look like he was trying fully. I don't want to say that for sure, because I have a feeling he's going to come out a new man here in Houston and do some different things. But even there, he might not be the wide receiver one. So Gabe Davis, very inconsistent, good. I don't know if the changes are a bad thing or if it's going to open things up.
Yeah. I just wanted to prompt that because I actually, down the stretch, I thought Stephon Diggs was actually bad and kind of hindered the offense. He was dropping a lot of the things that were thrown his way, and then he was whining when the things weren't. So to me, I think that this is a net positive in that locker room specifically. They did, like you talked about, the overhaul was so crazy that I had to change how I did this graphic. We used to have a picture on here. We no longer have a picture because it couldn't fit the picture, because on offense, they added Curtis Samuel, Marcus valdes-scantling, Matt Collins, Chase Claypool. We just talked about the wide receivers. Will Clapp to the offensive line. On defense, Casey Toole, Dwayne Smoot, Nicholas Moreau, Deion Jones, Mike Edwards, Deshaun Williams. And then their draft class, Keon Coleman, Cole Bishop, Dwayne Carter, Ray Davis, an older prospect, but probably an impact player for them. We'll talk about that later. Cedric Van Perrin-Granger, and then Edefwan Ulofoshio. I had to get him on the graphic because I love that linebacker. I think he can be an impact player for their defense as early as this year. They lost as many players. So Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, Nyheim Hines, Damian Harris, Deontay Hardy, Kyle Allen, all in the skill positions on offense. Their offensive line is overhauled as well. Mitch Morse, Ryan Bates, both gone. A ton of defensive tackles just out the door. And then the two safeties are kind of the big ones that ended up on the bottom of the graphic for some reason. But Micah Hyde, Jordan Poyer, they've been in and out of the lineup over the last couple of years. So, do you think that is more impactful than Diggs? Or do you think that it kind of is similar?
I think the in and out of the lineup makes it difficult to say that, because Diggs at least has been in. But when Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer have been on the field, they have been the focal point of this defense, really, and how they're playing defense and how offenses are having to attack them. Again, I have to keep saying it until he's actually signed somewhere. Micah Hyde is still a free agent. And I wouldn't be shocked if he's brought back as a rotational safety for this team, just as more of a leadership role than anything. But he's Still very good, just can't stay healthy. I think I will say the safeties have to be the biggest impact though,
Yeah.
because now you have to have some new people step up.
Yeah, that's right. Let's talk about the offense first. Offensive line: Deion Dawkins, David Edwards, Connor McGovern, Osiris Torrance, Spencer Brown, with Lyle Collins kind of being that swing tackle piece. I think the main thing is that the interior offensive line depth isn't very good, but I think you can say that about most NFL teams. When you look at those names, there's not much. Before, Ryan Bates was kind of that guy that gave you that depth on offense, on that interior. With him gone, I think they're going to look for someone else to step up. Overall, though, this group is, when I looked at it, I was like, yeah, that's a better group than I anticipated seeing, because I kind of forgot all the pieces that they are expecting a big jump from. Osiris Torrance is the main one that I think had a rough rookie year. I think he's going to look a little bit better in this next year. Wide receiver room, we just talked about that, but Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, Curtis Samuel are your three starters. I think Mac Hollins is probably your best backup of the group, and then you've got Marquez Valdes-Scantling, Chase Claypool, Justin Shorter, KJ Hamler, a ton of guys that are kind of battling for snaps or a place on the team. I think more than one of those players will get cut. So, and then Dalton Kincaid, Dawson Knox, Quentin Morris, who I like as another receiving weapon, Josh Allen, Mitch Trubisky, Shane Shelley, and running backs James Cook, Ray Davis, Ty Johnson, Darrington Evans, Frank Gore Jr. Offense is good. I still think this offense is really good.
Yeah, it's just you basically have to see how the wide receiver core shakes out, and then really the rotational running backs. Other than that, everything's they replaced some older offensive linemen with what they had on their bench and hoping to, unlock there, and then they got rid of their top two wide receivers because it just wasn't cutting it. Plus, contract wise, they didn't want to / couldn't pay it, so they brought in some new talent there. I do think this screams to me this is going to be a little bit more quick game in the wide receiving room and the tight ends, obviously, with a couple field structures to make those things happen. Hopefully, Keon Coleman can produce enough in the jump ball phase that him and Josh Allen can really make something special here.
Yeah, I think Allen's willingness to throw into tight windows now. I don't think Keon Coleman coming to this team 3 years ago, if he were the same prospect, of course, would be good. I think it'd be really bad. But now, because Josh Allen has taken a step forward, I heard on, I think it was the Athletic Football Show, they said they're saying, Josh, you have to be good now, no matter who the wide receivers are. And I think that he has earned that right. I don't think he needs a Stephon Diggs necessarily. I think he can make his teammates better now, and I think that they're going to be anticipating that. And then on the contract front, you mentioned also in the Athletic Football Show, the GM was on there and he was talking about, he's like, we have dead money. It's whether we eat it this year or next year, and we just felt like this was the right time to move on from Stephon Diggs. So it was an interesting way to word it, in that they were always planning to move on from him. It was just about when, which makes sense. Obviously, he's getting up there in age, but I think there was more going on there. Defense. So Greg Rousseau probably going to get paid a lot here soon. But they've got some depth there. Daquan Jones on the interior, Austin Johnson, Ed Oliver. Dwayne Carter is a perfect complement or backup for Ed Oliver. They're building this roster in a very unique way, but it's a way that I think can work. AJ Epinesa is back. Von Miller is still on the team. You're really hoping that he gets something back, because it wasn't very good. He's been hurt, but then when he was on the field, he just wasn't very good. Your linebacking group is arguably better, with Nicholas Moreau slotted in there. I think Terrell Bernard took a massive step forward last year. Matt Milano is an all-pro level player. Your corner room is still this corner room. I don't know why they keep doing this, but Rasul Douglas, Teron Johnson, and Christian Benford, and then Kyrie Elam I would call him a bust at this point. I just don't think that he's been very good. I think he might need a change of scenery this year. Cam Lewis is there now. Daquan Hardy is there. And then your safety duo now is potentially Taylor Rapp and Mike Edwards. It could be Cole Bishop. I think Cole Bishop starts this year at some point. So I'm excited to see Cole Bishop in this defense. I think they got a player that can kind of step in a Poyer and Hyde-esque type of impact role eventually. And DeMar Hamlin's still there. Shout out him. Do you have any thoughts on this defense?
Yeah. Like you said, the corners, it's again, we were screaming for them to get a corner of the year. They drafted Elam. It just hasn't worked out. I think they're giving him one more year to figure it out, and hopefully he does at least step up to a high rotational piece to make this corner room a little bit better. Teron Johnson's one of the best slots in the league, so that's
right.
Their strength in the secondary. I'd say right now, even with Taylor Rapp, who is pretty good, not the best safety, but definitely an above average starter in this league. Cole Bishop has the range of outcome to be an incredible safety. We got to see a little bit more from him, but I think he was drafted probably a little bit low even, and I think he should really step out here. And yeah, you have a great D line, a lot of depth, a good edge rushing core, and then if Von Miller can get back to half of what he was, he'll be a plus rotational player for them. And to bank on that, they brought in Smoot and Tuhill to really be a little bit of inside-outside guys for them alongside Rousseau and Epinesa, who Epinesa stepped up huge last year, and Rousseau has just been pretty much good since his second year in the league. So
yeah, it's a good team on defense too. That's why I think like we talked about, this is more of a retool than a rebuild. I do want to mention Dorian Williams before we get out of here because we forgot to mention him on the Franchise Fix episode and someone yelled at us. So he had some good snaps last year, but he was a day 3 rookie that I think there's a reason they went out and got Nicholas Moreau. I think he'll be in the rotation for sure, and he can be a good player. We just need to see a little bit more from him, which is probably why we didn't mention it on the Franchise Fix a few months ago. So
it's all right, but I think another year for him will be key. And that's again why Moreau's there to hedge that bet.
Yeah. All right, let's get into schedule predictions. So this schedule shakes out kind of difficult in the beginning of the year. I keep saying that for all of these teams, but there are some really good football games in the first 4 to 5 weeks of this season. You get the Cardinals to start, which I think is a good, let's get our feet wet a little bit before we go into this ringer of Miami, Jacksonville, Baltimore, Houston, New York. I think the Jets deserve to be in the conversation of that's a tough game, especially in division. And then you kind of get a little bit of a break there with Tennessee, Seattle. But then it's back to a tough stretch. And then coming out of your bye at the end of the year, this schedule is hard, man. Despite all of the things that we said about how this offense looks better than we thought and this defense still looks good and ready to compete, this is a tough schedule. So I could see maybe a little bit of regression for them. Do you kind of agree?
Yeah, slightly. Obviously, 10.5 over under for the win total is spot on, in my opinion, because I think that's right. Obviously we'll both go into ours in a second, but that's right at the line for almost everyone just because of this schedule. 7th hardest in the league. They are minus 138 on the under to win the 10.5, plus 112 on the over. So very close. Minus 168 to make the playoffs, plus 160 to win the division first. Obviously, which is a big thing to say with the Dolphins and the Jets being such good teams. Plus 1,300 to win the Super Bowl, which is the 4th best odds, and favored to win 13 out of 17 games. Obviously, preseason, that will change during the year. But this is not an easy schedule by any means. And like you said, they really don't have a lot of breaks because even, like you mentioned, Seattle's a break, and that's really not even a break. That's just not as bad as the ones before. And I think Jacksonville hits that same mark where they're not this elite team as of right now, but they have the opportunity to win 12 games. Just that they have that ceiling. I think Seattle's there as well. For obviously about 8, but here we are. And then Titans, we don't know what the Titans are going to be in week 7. That's the biggest thing to me. They've spent a lot of money this offseason. That could be harder than we were anticipating. And like you said, kind of a murder's row with, Chiefs by 49ers, Rams, Lions. And then you get the Patriots finally. And then you get the Jets, which either is a revenge game for you or a revenge game for them. And then the Patriots again to finish. I think the 2 Patriots games at the end might be what catapults them into the playoffs.
Yeah, that's right. I have them at 10-7. I have them as the 4 seed, winning the division at 10-7 for what it's worth. Um, Winning a tiebreaker over the Jets and over Miami. I actually have all three of those teams at 10-7. Um, Shout out the Patriots for probably losing a lot of those divisional games, by the way, because I think that's going to help all three of those teams. But this is a 4 seed that we talked about. Can the Buffalo Bills win the Super Bowl? Anytime they get into the playoffs, I think that they can win the Super Bowl because of their quarterback. We'll talk about fantasy projections here in a second, but I think that Josh Allen is going to be in contention for the MVP this year. I think that anytime he's in the playoffs, he gives you an opportunity to win. And I know people like to hate on, well, he can't beat the Chiefs. Well, as the 4 seed, there's potential to not even get the Chiefs, hopefully. So we'll see. But to me, yes, the answer is yes. The Buffalo Bills are Super Bowl contenders, even with the roster training that's happened this
Yeah,
offseason.
they like you said, just have to make the playoffs. The Bills just made the same bet that the Chiefs did 2 years ago. You reset the roster, got rid of a lot of vets, a lot of high contracts, got rid of Tyreek Hill, you got rid of Diggs and Gabe Davis to retool and get cheaper and bet on the quarterback to make this offense the same or slightly worse, but you're still able to keep it going. And by the playoff time, if they make it, which again, I have a 10-7 4 seed as well, all tied with the Jets and Dolphins. Ironic that we did that.
Mm-hmm.
But if they get there, they're Super Bowl contenders, no doubt, because of Josh Allen, which is the opposite of what we'll say with like the Dolphins, where we
Right.
know later months this team is not built for it as of right now, or they haven't shown us they're built for it. I'll give them that.
Yeah.
But the Bills have, this is not going to be easy at all, but we both have 10-7. I'm assuming your losses are to only the big dogs as well. Like I have Miami, Baltimore, Houston, Kansas City, San Francisco, Rams, Detroit. So that 3-team stretch, I have them losing all three, which I think they're
Me
more
too.
toss-up than losses, but those are the 7 losses. I mean, none of them are cheap, and we know a lot of these good teams will give up a cheap loss here and there. So that could be the huge difference in this playoff race.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I mean, we're lockstep here. We're in lockstep. All right. Let's talk fantasy projections. Josh Allen, QB1, 4,200 yards, almost 4,300, 29 touchdowns, 17 interceptions. I do think that there will be a little bit of a curve. He's always susceptible to throwing interceptions. It really doesn't matter all that much. Most of his interceptions are in situations where you can kind of afford an interception. If you look at like EPA per play and things like that, or EPA lost on his interceptions, he's really not been that bad. But I do think that might prevent him from getting the MVP. We'll talk about my MVP later. James Cook as the RB7, just catching a ton of footballs, which will be good for this offense. Ray Davis operating as that RB2, kind of eating up some carries when James Cook needs a breather. And then I have Khalil Shakir being the most productive wide receiver. I have him at over 1,000 yards, 5 touchdowns. I do have Keon Coleman as that wide receiver too, but I do think this is a wide receiver by committee. I think Curtis Samuel is going to have some fantasy relevant weeks. I think that really your staple and the guy that needs to be in your lineup every week is actually the tight end with 85 receptions, 837 yards, and 7 touchdowns with Dalton Kincaid. Tight end 8 doesn't sound great, but like that's still in your lineup every single week. I think you're kind of playing a little bit of a matchup game, guessing game with the wide receivers on this team.
Yeah, and I think I think James Cook isn't really like a big standout of this because he really through the second half of the year performed like this. This is
Mm-hmm.
what we're expecting. I would say, got rid of competition for touches, but brought in some young guys to hopefully take that mantle in Ray Davis and Frank Gore Jr. I think the biggest talking point is Khalil Shakir, who currently consensus wide receiver 63, wide receiver 36. Even if there's some plus minus there, he drops to wide receiver 40 in the year 42. I think that's a massive value in drafts right now. He's being drafted behind Keon Coleman, who is wide receiver 58 right now. I think that's safe. I think wide receiver 50/45 is probably his ceiling. If he gets a ton of touchdowns, obviously it's a whole different story, but we're assuming the tight ends and Josh Allen get those touchdowns here. But yeah, I mean, basically, you're even Curtis Samuel's wide receiver 53 on consensus. So they're all about the same, and you're very clearly on the Khalil Shakir bandwagon here. So I'm assuming you're taking him over a lot of people late in drafts and probably reaching in a lot of people's eyes.
Oh yeah, I'm comfortable doing that. I think what we saw from him was like this kid can be super efficient when he touches the football, and he was. I believe I saw a stat. It was like he was the most efficient on his air yards. Something like that. I don't know. I didn't know that stat when I projected this out. I just looked at this offense and said, "Oh, Josh Allen's going to really like throwing to Khalil Shakir because he already has shown that he likes throwing to Khalil Shakir." So, to me, this is like I said, a good offense. I think they're going to score a lot of points, going to score a lot of touchdowns. A fantasy relevant one. I wouldn't draft Ray Davis, but I also think if James Cook goes down, Ray Davis could be a massive fantasy football performer this year. So,
yeah. He can eat touches.
I don't think
it's the receiving game is where Cook really makes his mark.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I think they'd probably go a little bit more committee in that case, but either way, this is an offense that I'm wanting every share of. This is a team that I'm buying stock into. I think that we could be looking at a potential. It would be unlikely that the 10-win Buffalo Bills are in the Super Bowl, but also that's the type of year that we could see. Because I think while the Texans are good, we'll talk about them in a few more weeks probably, but like there's certainly some areas where the Bills have the advantage, and so I think that Bills could win a Super Bowl this year.
Every chance.
Yeah. All right. Before we get out of here, we do want to mention our Patreon, patreon.com/theDevaRoyale. That is where you can support us. We've got Dynasty content. We've got Devy content. We've got NFL draft content. We've got everything that you could possibly ask for at $5 a month. So it's basically a cup of coffee per month to support us. If you feel so inclined, you can. If not, just subscribe to the channel. Make sure you like this video and drop a comment. Do you think that we're too high on the Bills? Do you think we're too low? Do you think that there are some players that might be standouts as we go into the 2024 season? Make sure you let us know. Thank you guys for watching. We'll catch you next time.